Perhaps it would be better, sir, to send the men away, said he to the colonel, for he was a much privileged subaltern. He put his arms round the rag-bound horror as he spoke, and dropped him into a chair. It may not have been explained that the littleness of Mildred lay in his being 6 feet 4 and big in proportions. The corporal, seeing that an officer was disposed to look after the capture, and that the colonel's eyes was beginning to blaze, promptly removed himself and his men. The mess was left alone with the carbine thief, who laid his head on the table and wept bitterly, hopelessly, and inconsolably, as little children weep. Hira Singh leapt to his feet. "Colonel Sahib," said he, "that man is no Afghan, for they weep aye, nor is he a Hindustan, for they weep oh-ho. He weeps after the fashion of the white men, who say ow, ow." "Now where the dickens did you get that knowledge, Hira Singh?" said the captain of the Lashkar team. "Hear him," said Hira Singh promptly, pointing at the crumpled figure that wept as though it would never cease. He said, "My God," said little Mildred, "I heard him say it." The colonel and the mess room looked at the man in silence. It is a horrible thing to hear a man cry. A woman can sob from the top of her palate or her lips or anywhere else, but a man must cry from his diaphragm, and it rends him to pieces. "Poor devil," said the colonel, coughing tremendously. "We ought to send him to hospital. He's been manhandled." Now the adjutant loves his carbines. They were to him as his grandchildren, the men standing in the first place. He grunted rebelliously. "I can understand an Afghan stealing, because he's built that way, but I can't understand his crying. That makes it worse." The brandy must have affected Durkovich, for he lay back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. There was nothing special in the ceiling beyond a shadow as of a huge black coffin. Owing to some peculiarity in the construction of the mess room, this shadow was always thrown when the candles were lighted. It never disturbed the digestion of the White Hussars. They were, in fact, rather proud of it. "Is he going to cry all night?" said the colonel. "Or are we supposed to sit up with the little Mildred's guests until he feels better?" The man in the chair threw up his head and stared at the mess. "Oh my God," he said, and every soul in the mess rose to his feet. Then the Lashkar captain did a deed for which he ought to have been given the Victoria Cross, distinguished gallantry in a fight against overwhelming curiosity. He picked up his team with his eyes as the hostess picks up the ladies at an opportune moment, and, pausing only by the colonel's chair to say, "This isn't our affair, you know, sir," led them into the veranda and the gardens. Hira Singh was the last to go, and he looked at Durkovich. But Durkovich had departed into a brandy paradise of his own. His lips moved without a sound, and he was studying the coffin on the ceiling. White all over," said Bassett Halmore, the adjutant. "What a pernicious renegade he must be. I wonder where he came from." The colonel shook the man gently by the arm. "Who are you?" said he. There was no answer. The man stared round the mess room and smiled in the colonel's face. Little Mildred, who was always more of a woman than a man till "boot and saddle" was sounded, repeated the question in a voice that would have drawn confidence from a geyser. The man only smiled. Durkovich, at the far end of the table, slid gently from his chair to the floor. No son of Adam in this present imperfect world can mix the hussar's champagne with hussar's brandy by 5 and 8 glasses of each without remembering the pit whence he was digged and descended thither. The band began to play the tune with which the White Hussars from the date of their formation have concluded all their functions. They would sooner be disbanded than abandon that tune. It is a part of their system. The man straightened himself in his chair and drummed on the table with his fingers. "I don't see why we should entertain lunatics," said the colonel. "Call a guard and send him off to the cells. We'll look into this business in the morning. Give him a glass of wine first, though." Little Mildred filled a sherry glass with the brandy and thrust it over to the man. He drank, and the tune grows louder, and he straightened himself yet more. Then he put out his long taloned hands to a piece of plate opposite and fingered it lovingly. There was a mystery connected with that piece of plate, in the shape of a spring which converted what was a 7-branched candlestick, 3 springs on each side and 1 in the middle, into a sort of wheel-spoke candelabra. He found the spring, pressed it, and laughed weakly. He rose from his chair and inspected a picture on the wall, then moved on to another picture, the mess watching him without a word. Then he came to the mantelpiece. He shook his head and seemed distressed. A piece of plate representing a mounted hussar in full uniform caught his eye. He pointed to it, then to the mantelpiece with inquiry in his eyes. "What is it? Oh, what is it?" said the little Mildred. Then, as a mother might speak to a child, "That is a horse. Yes, a horse." Very slowly came the answer in a thick, passionless gutter. "Yes, I have seen. But where is the horse?" You could have heard the hearts of the mess beating as the man drew back to give the stranger full room in his wanderings. There was no question of calling the guard. Again he spoke, very slowly. "Where is our horse?" There is but one horse in the White Hussar, and his portrait hangs outside the door of the mess room. He is a piebald drum horse, the king of the regimental band, that served the regiment for 30 years, and in the end was shot for old age. Half the mess tore the thing down from its place and thrust it into the man's hands. He placed it above the mantelpiece. It clattered on the ledge as his poor hands dropped it, and he staggered towards the bottom of the table, falling into Mildred's chair. Then all the men spoke to one another, something after this fashion. "The drum horse hasn't hung over the mantelpiece since '67. How does he know?" "Mildred, go and speak to him again." "Colonel, what are you going to do?" "Oh, dry up, and give the poor devil a chance to pull himself together." "It isn't possible anyhow. The man's a lunatic." Little Mildred stood at the colonel's side, talking in his ear. "Will you be good enough to take your seats, please, gentlemen?" he said, and the mess dropped into the chairs. Only Durkovich's seat, next to little Mildred's, was blank, and little Mildred himself had found Hira Singh's place. The wide-eyed mess sergeant filled the glasses in dead silence. Once more the colonel rose, but his hand shook, and the port spilled on the table as he looked straight at the man in little Mildred's chair, and said hoarsely, "Mr. Weiss, the Queen." There was a little pause, but the man sprung to his feet and answered without hesitation, "The Queen! God bless her!" And as he emptied the thin glass, he snapped and shrank between his he snapped the shank between his fingers. Long ago, when the Empress of India was a young woman and there were no unclean ideals in the land, it was the custom of a few messes to drink to the Queen's toast in a broken glass, to the vast delight of the mess contractors. The custom is now dead, because there is nothing to break anything for, except now and again the word of a government that has been broken already. "That settles it," said the colonel, with a gasp. "He's not a sergeant. What in the world is he?" The entire mess echoed the word, and the volley of questions would have scared any man. It was no wonder that the ragged, filthy invader could only smile and shake his head. From under the table, calm and smiling, rose Durkovich, who had been roused from healthful slumber by feet upon his body. By the side of the man he rose, and the man shrieked and groveled. It was a horrible sight, coming so swiftly upon the pride and glory of the toast that had brought the strayed wits together. Durkovich made no offer to raise him, but little Mildred heaved him up in an instant. It is not good that a gentleman who can answer to the Queen's toast should lie at the feet of a subaltern of Cossacks. The hasty action tore the wretch's upper clothing nearly to the waist, and his body was seamed with dry, black scars. There is only one weapon in the world that cuts in parallel lines, and it is neither the cane nor the cat. Durkovich saw the marks, and the pupils of his eyes dilated. Also his face changed. He said something that sounded like "Shito vi take," and the man fawningly answered "Chetriri." "What's that?" said everyone together. "His number. That is the number 4, you know." Durkovich spoke very thickly. "What has a Queen's officer to do with a qualified number?" said the colonel, and an unpleasant growl ran round the table. "How can I tell?" said the affable Oriental with a sweet smile. "He is how you have it? Escaped. Run away. From over there." He nodded towards the darkness of the night. "Speak to him, if he'll answer you, and speak to him gently," said little Mildred, setting the man in a chair. It seemed almost improper to all present that Durkovich should sip brandy as he talked in purring, spitting Russian to the creature who answered so feebly and with such evident dread. But since Durkovich appeared to understand, no one said a word. All breathed heavily, leaning forward in long gasps of the conversation. The next time that they have no engagement on hand, the White Hussars intend to go to St. Petersburg in a body to learn Russian. He does not know how many years ago, said Durkovich, facing the mess, but he says it was a very long ago in a war. I think that there was an accident. He says that he was of this glorious and distinguished regiment in the war. The rolls! Homer, get the rolls! Said little Mildred, and the adjutant dashed off bareheaded to the orderly room where the muster rolls of the regiment were kept. He returned just in time to hear Durkovich conclude. Therefore, my dear friends, I am most sorry to say that it was an accident which would have been repairable if he had apologized to that of our colonel, which he had insulted. Then followed another growl, which the colonel tried to beat down. The mess was in no mood just then to wait insults to Russian colonels. He does not remember, but I think that there was an accident, so that he was not exchanged among the prisoners, but he was sent to another place. How do you say? The country. So he says he came here. He does not know how he came, eh? He was at Chepane. The man caught the word, nodded and shivered. At Zingast and Irishtuk. I cannot understand how he escaped. He says, too, that he was in the forests for many years, but how many years he has forgotten. That with many things. It was an accident, done because he did not apologize to that of our colonel. Ah! Instead of echoing Durkovich's sigh of regret, it is sad to record that the White Hussars livelily exhibited unchristian delight and other emotions hardly restrained by their sense of hospitality. Homer flung the frayed and yellowed regimental rolls on the table, and the men flung themselves at these. Steady! 56, 55, 54, said Homer. Here we are. Lieutenant Austin Limison, missing. Lieutenant Austin Limison, missing. That was before Sebastopol. What an infernal shame! Insulted one of their colonels and was quietly shipped off. 30 years of his life wiped out. But he never apologized. Said he'd see him damned first, chorused the mess. Poor chap! I suppose he never had the chance afterwards. How did he come here? Said the colonel. The dingy heap in the chair could give no answer. Do you know who you are? It laughed weakly. Do you know that you are Limison, Lieutenant Limison of the White Hussars? Swiftly as a shot came the answer in a slightly surprised tone. Yes, I'm Limison, of course. The light died out in his eyes, and the man collapsed, watching every motion of Durkovich with terror. A flight from Siberia may fix a few elementary facts in the mind, but it does not seem to lead to continuity of thought. The man could not explain how, like a homing pigeon, he had found his way to his old mess again. Of what he had suffered or seen, he knew nothing. He cringed before Durkovich as instinctively as he had pressed the spring of the candlestick, sought the picture of the drum horse, and answered to the toast of the Queen. The rest was a blank that the dreaded Russian tongue could only part remove. His head bowed on his breast, and he giggled and cowered alternatively. The devil that lived in the brandy prompted Durkovich at this extremely inopportune moment to make a speech. He rose, swaying slightly, gripped the table edge while his eyes glowed like opals, and began. Fellow soldiers glorious, true friends and hospitables, it was an accident, and deplorable, most deplorable. Here he smiled sweetly all round the mess. But you will think of this little thing. So little, is it not? The Tsar, posh! I snap my fingers at him. Do I believe in him? No, but in a Slav who've done nothing. Him I believe. 70. How much millions people have done nothing except nothing, not one thing. Posh! Napoleon was an episode. He banged a hand on the table. Hear you, old peoples, we have done nothing in the world out here. All our work is to do, and it shall be done, old peoples. Get away! He waved his hands imperiously, and pointed to the man. You see him. He is not good to see. He is just one little, oh so little, accident that no one remembered. Now he is that. So you will be, brother soldiers, so brave you will be, but you will never come back. You will all go where he is gone, or... He pointed to the great coffin shadow on the ceiling and muttering, 70 millions, get away, you old peoples, and fell asleep. Sweet, "And to the point," said little Mildred. "What's the use of getting wroth? Let's make this poor devil comfortable." But that was a matter suddenly and swiftly taken from the loving hands of the White Hussars. The lieutenant had returned only to go away again 3 days later, when the wail of the Dead March and the tramp of squadrons told the wondering station, who saw no gap in the mess table, that an officer of the regiment had resigned his new-found commission. And Hndcp, bland, supple, and always genial, went away too by a night train. Little Mildred and another man saw him off, for he was the guest of the mess, and even had he smitten the colonel with the open hand, the law of that mess allowed no relaxation of hospitality. "Goodbye, Hndcp, and a pleasant journey," said little Mildred. "Au revoir," said the Russian. "Indeed, but we thought you were going home." "Yes, but I will come again. My dear friends, is that road shut?" He pointed to where the North Star burned over the Khyber Pass. "By Jove, I forgot, of course. Happy to meet you, old man, any time you like. Got everything you want? Cheroots, ice, bedding? That's all right. Well, au revoir, Hndcp." Said the other man as the tail lights of the train grew small. "Of all the unmitigated?" Little Mildred answered nothing, but watched the North Star and hummed a selection from recent similar burlesque that had much delighted the White Hussars. It ran: "I'm sorry for Mr. Bluebeard, I'm sorry to cause him pain, but a terrible spree there's sure to be when he comes back again." That is He Who Was by Rudyard Kipling.